If you've researched tiny homes on wheels and came across the tiny house on wheels and the park model tiny home, only to realize they're not the same thing, you aren't alone. If you're a little confused like I was, we're going to clear that up today. We are going to put these two head to head because they're both tiny homes, they both have wheels, but they're built for very different lifestyles. One is better for comfort and long-term living. The other gives you flexibility, mobility, and even off-grid options. So by the end of the video, you're gonna know how they're similar and different, how to tell them apart, and how to choose the one that fits your life and your goals, plus where to buy them. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Erin, and I'm a real estate agent passionate about alternative housing because I understand what's going on in the real estate market. We simply need smaller options. I create content to help you learn more about ADUs, tiny homes, and maximizing smaller spaces through two different YouTube channels. I'll link the other one in the description. So if you're looking to downsize, find a tiny home community, or retire tiny, you came to the right place. Let's get into today's topic, which I broke up into 6 parts. The first, let's compare the park model tiny home and the tiny home on wheels. How are they similar? Both are under 400 square feet. Both can have a full kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, a loft, even porches. Both are great for downsizing, retirement, affordable housing, and maybe creating rental income. They're both built on trailers and they both have wheels. They both must use a small space efficiently and can be customized to what you need, although the park model is only semi-customizable. That's a lot of similarities. Are you sure they're not the same? So let's talk about the differences. Now here's where things get interesting because we get to talk about how they're different, which is where the clarity comes in. So let's compare the features of each. First, how they're built. The tiny house on wheels is going to be RVIA certified, follow the IRC code, or possibly none. Some are DIY. The park model, it's going to follow the ANSI 119.5 RV standard. Now the maximum size, the tiny house on wheels, 8.5 feet. That's the max so that they can be towed on the road. The park model, typically 12 to 15 feet wide. The mobility of each, the tiny house, it's going to be easy to tow. It is made to move. The park model home, you're going to need a professional to move it and probably a wide load permit. Now the look and feel of a tiny house is really kind of cabin-like and it's very minimalist. The park model, it's more cottage style and it feels like a traditional home. Zoning for tiny houses, the rules vary by city and state. But for park models, they're treated as RVs, and so sometimes that makes them easier to place. The utilities, the tiny house on wheels, it can be off-grid if it's built like that. The park model, you're gonna need full hookups for water, sewer, power, everything. The resale of the tiny house is gonna vary because there's so many different types. But the park model home, it's often gonna be higher just because there's more demand for a permanent setup. So there's definitely some differences there, but let's talk about how to tell the difference between each. Because when you see one in person or in a listing online, here's how you know what you're looking at. Park model homes, they're gonna have that ANSI tag inside. They're probably gonna be 10, 12, 15 feet wide. They're gonna have really big porches sometimes. The tiny house, those are gonna be narrower, 8.5 feet wide because it's gotta meet the road standards to be able to travel without a wide load permit. They're often gonna look a little more modern or possibly rustic. They may be built by custom tiny home builders, possibly even DIYers, and they might not be certified. So you definitely wanna ask. So which one's right for you? Before you get into the weeds on either of the options, make sure you check the zoning for each because if you're gonna be parking or placing your home in a permanent place, you wanna make sure of the rules. Also consider how you're gonna pay for it, how you're gonna insure it. If you need financing or insurance, then you're gonna have to check the fine print to see what certifications matter. So you may wanna choose a tiny house on wheels if you wanna move it easily or travel with it. If you wanna go off grid with solar, composting toilets, water tanks, or if you want more control over your layout. If you're okay with a smaller width and tighter layout, or if you like the idea of minimalism and flexibility. Choose that park model home if you plan to stay parked in a long-term tiny home community or RV community. If you want a wider, more comfortable space with full-size appliances. If you're downsizing for retirement, or if you just want that stability. If you want a setup that looks and feels like a traditional home. And if you're not interested in moving it, again, once it's placed. Park models are great for staying put, living comfortably, and keeping life simple without sacrificing space. Now let's talk price. What about that cost? A tiny house on wheels, typically you're gonna be $50,000 to $100,000, depending on that size and then what finishes you have. A park model is gonna start around $70,000 and they can go up to $120,000 or more, especially for those high-end models. So the tiny house on wheels may cost less up front, but it could require extra setup like solar, towing gear, and then land prep. Park models often include delivery, setup. So either way, both are far more affordable than a traditional home and can offer real freedom if it's done right. So where do you buy one? Park model homes, you're gonna see these sold at RV dealerships, manufactured home dealers, or even like a specialized park model builder. They're usually available for regional delivery. The tiny house on wheels, you're gonna find these through a tiny home builder, tiny home listings, the tiny house marketplace, even Facebook Marketplace. Many are custom built or sold secondhand. So no matter which route you choose, you're always gonna need to check the certifications, dimensions, and the zoning rules where you plan to place it. So when it comes to park model versus tiny house, it's not about which one is better, it's about which one fits your life. Think about how mobile you wanna be, how off-grid you wanna be, and how much space you actually need. I wanna know, which are you leaning towards? Is the park model gonna win, or is it gonna be a tiny house on wheels? Tell me in the comments. I hope you learned something from today's video. Thanks for hanging out with me. If you want to help support my mission to advocate for tiny homes and ADUs, give the video a like, share it with a friend, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on some exciting stuff. If you have any thoughts, please leave those in the comments. And if you have a tiny home story you want to share, I've got a way to get in touch with me in the description. Check out rearon.com for tips, resources, and real-world stories. Also, check out the next video I picked just for you right here.